the day Reyes joined our unit. Kowalski looked at her like she'd walked into the wrong building. Not the wrong country, the wrong building. She had, well, her rucksack slung over one shoulder, her rifle case in the other hand, and this expression on her face, not hard, not soft, just present, like she'd already calculated every man in that FOB and filed her conclusions. She was 19 years old, and standing in a forward operating base 23 kilometers from the Syrian border, and the first thing out of Kowalski's mouth was, "They sent us a babysitter." I didn't laugh. Mendez did. Hendricks, too, a little. I, in my opinion, watched her set down her rucksack with the kind of careful deliberateness that people use when they're deciding not to say something they'll regret. She looked at Kowalski once. Just once. Plus, then, she asked Sergeant Okafor where her bunk was. That was it. No comeback. No fire. Just the question. I don't know why that bothered me more than anything else she could have said. Her name was Specialist Elena Reyes, out of Fort Bragg by way of Albuquerque, New Mexico. Sniper qualified, which was the reason she was here at all. We lost our dedicated Overwatch position 2 weeks earlier when Darnell took shrapnel through his right shoulder at a routing checkpoint outside Alcame. The hole she was filling wasn't symbolic. Plus, it was structural. We needed eyes and a trigger finger at elevation, and Command had sent us this. 19. I'm 26. At the time, that felt like a canyon. The first week, I guess, the comments were constant. Not vicious, not the way things get when men want to truly break something, but grinding. The kind of low-grade ridicule that doesn't leave marks. Kowalski calling her Junior every third sentence. Hendricks asking her if she needed help cleaning her rifle. His voice doing that particular thing, where the offer is the insult. Mendez, who I always thought was smarter than the others, just going quiet around her in a way that was somehow worse, like she was whether he was waiting out. She didn't eat with us the first 3 nights. I found her outside the second time, sitting on an ammo crate with an MRE and her notebook, writing something with a pen that had a cracked clip. The desert wind was doing that thing it does at 2,100 hours. Not cold exactly, but sharp like it has edges. She was in her jacket, but hadn't zipped it. I almost said something. I didn't. What I basically told myself was that it wasn't my business. What was actually TBH true was that I didn't know what I'd have said. They don't mean it? They didn't mean it. You'll earn their respect, and I didn't know yet if she would. That's the honest answer. I was still watching. She qualified on the range her second day. I was pulling brass detail nearby when she ran her sequence. I wasn't watching on purpose, but when I heard her grouping 5 shots, 1 ragged hole at 800 meters, I turned around. Hendricks was the range officer. He held her target up and looked at it for a long second. He didn't say anything, which, coming from Hendricks, was its own kind of statement. She broke down her rifle, packed her kit, walked off the range without waiting to be dismissed. Not insubordinate, just done, like a person who has learned that waiting for acknowledgement is a tax she's decided to stop paying. I watched her go. The wind picked up a handful of sand and threw it against my neck. I started counting the days until we'd get the mission briefing. We all knew something was building. You could feel it in the radio chatter, in the way Sergeant Okafor stopped sleeping through afternoons, in the extra ammunition requisition that came through on a Thursday. The mockery continued. Reyes continued too, which both things running parallel, neither intersecting, until the night everything intersected all at once. She's only 19, Kowalski had said that morning, pouring his coffee and not looking at anyone in particular. What's TBH she gonna do when it gets real? Nobody answered him. I remember thinking, that's the wrong question. The right question was what we were going to do. What any like of us were going to do. Because in my experience, the desert doesn't care how old you are when it decides to swallow you whole. It would take 6 more days for me to be proven right about that. 6 days for what it's worth, and a building and a window at 1,100 meters. To be fair, but we'll get there. Plus, the mission brief came on a Tuesday at 0200 hours, which is how you know it's not a routine patrol. Routine patrols get briefed at 0600 with coffee and daylight. Whatever happens at 0200, that's command telling you the window is closing and they'd rather you be tired than late. Sergeant Okafor ran the brief himself, which 12 of us in the tent, The map lit under the red-filtered lamp, his voice level and precise the way it always was before things got complicated. The objective was a 3-story commercial structure in a district the locals called the Old Market, a half-demolished neighborhood 2 kilometers outside the city center where most of the standing walls were held up by habit rather than mortar. A SEAL team, plus, for operators. Call sign Bedrock. They'd gone in at 2,100 hours on a targeted detention op. The target was secondary. What they'd stumbled into was a network position, a communications hub running out of the building's ground floor. 32, maybe 40 armed fighters who hadn't been on the pre-mission intel. Bedrock had taken the upper floors. They'd secured 2 of their own wounded. They were out of their exfil window, and the QRF, the unit supposed to get to them first, had been diverted by secondary contact 6 kilometers south. Well, that left us. Why us? Mendez asked. Okafor pointed to the building schematic, and the approach from the south, the only viable vehicle approach, ran through a single-lane corridor flanked on both sides by elevated structures. 2 windows on the east face of the taller building, one on the roofline to the west. Any vehicle that moved down that corridor without overwatch suppression was going to get shredded before it reached the front door. We need the windows closed before the convoy moves. He said it flat and tactically matter-of-fact. That's the mission. Everybody in the tent did the same math at the same time. I looked at Reyes, and she was already looking at the schematic. Her finger wasn't on the building. It was on the ridge elevation northeast of the corridor, the only position with line of sight to all 3 windows simultaneously. She was calculating range, angle, the wind data from the last 4 hours. I could almost watch her do it. Plus, what's the range to the east-face windows from the ridge? For what it's worth, she asked. Okafor, 1,100. 1,150 to the roofline. Honestly, plus, she nodded once, like she'd just confirmed a grocery list. Kowalski opened his mouth. Okafor looked at him, and he closed it. We rolled out at 0310. The convoy was 2 vehicles, the gun truck and the transport. Reyes and I were in the 3rd element, on foot, working northeast toward the ridge while the convoy held 2 kilometers back and waited for her green light. My job was to get her there, provide security, call her shots if she needed a second set of eyes. The walk was 22 minutes. No talking. The night was that peculiar desert black where the stars are almost too bright, like the sky is trying to compensate for everything happening below it. My boots found loose stones twice. Plus, each time the sound seemed enormous, and I held still for a count of 5, listening. Reyes never made a sound. I don't mean she was careful, and I mean her footfall wasn't thing. Like she'd learned to move through a room without disturbing the air. We reached the ridge at 0337. Honestly, she went to work. Plus, she set up without a word, the rifle going onto the bipod with the practiced quiet of someone who has done this in the dark so many times it has become a body memory. She ranged the first window, then the second, then the roofline. She whispered the numbers back to me, and I logged them into the handset for the convoy commander. Wind? I asked. She held her finger up. Kind of felt it. 8 knots, and north-northeast, gusting to 12 at intervals. For second cycle, kind of I related. To be fair, then we waited. Waiting before, pretty much, contact is its own specific experience. It doesn't feel like patience. It feels like the moment before a car accident, that fraction where your body already knows and your brain hasn't caught up yet. I had drunk 2/3 of my water without noticing. My hands were steady, but my jaw ached from clenching. Below us, in the dark mass of the old market, the building was lit from within. Yellow actually, light in the lower windows, movement shadows. Somewhere like inside that structure for Americans were bleeding and waiting and probably running the same calculations we were. TBH, I thought about Bedrock. Didn't know their names. Knew they were 4 people who had gone in expecting 30 minutes of work and gotten something entirely different. That happens. That's the thing nobody briefs you on properly. Not the possibility of it happening, but the feeling of being the thing that happened to. The way the mission you plan becomes a different mission inside 30 seconds of first contact, and You have to become a different person inside the same 30 seconds, or you don't come home. I thought about Darnell and his shrapnel shoulder. I thought about Reyes being 19. I looked at her. She was motionless behind the rifle. Her, for what it's worth, breathing was measured. 4 in, hold, 4 out. She'd gone somewhere interior, somewhere past nerves, past the cold, past the question of whether the men back at the FOB thought she belonged here. Shimmy looked like a fixed point. Radio crackled. Plus, convoy commander, we're prepared to move on your green. I looked at the windows. Honestly, one of them moved. Look, a shadow. Then, the barrel of a PCAM machine gun settling into the frame, the operator finding his angle on the corridor below. Contact, I said to Reyes. East window, upper floor, which he's setting up. She already had him. Plus, I see him, she said. Not nervous. Not performing calm. Just stating a fact. On your call, I told her. She breathed out. The 4-second wind cycle turned. She waited for the lull. Found it. And then everything changed. The first shot sounds different when you're the one calling it. Not louder and different. The sound has weight. She fired on the exhale, same way she'd been trained, same way every qualified sniper is trained. But there was something in the execution that made me think, this isn't training. The PCAM gunner in the east window went still in the way bodies go still when the nervous system stops negotiating. To be fair, he didn't fall immediately. He just stopped. The gun listed left. Then, both went down together. Hit, I confirmed. Window 1 clear. She was already moving to window 2, which the problem with window 2 was the angle. The east face of the building had 2 firing positions, one stacked above the other on different floors, and the lower position had a parapet, a lip of concrete that gave the occupant coverage from a ridge. She had maybe 40% of his body available if he stayed in his setup position. That number dropped to near 0 if he moved back into shadow. He was already moving. He's pulling back, I said. She adjusted. Maybe 3 degrees. She was compensating for the parapet height, calculating where his head would be relative to the window frame if he came back forward to reacquire the corridor. He's gonna come back up, she said. He needs the angle too. She was right. He needed the corridor as much as we needed the corridor clear. He'd pull back, take a breath, come back to his position. She waited. I watched the window, and 1,100 meters away, across the dark, across the wind, across the rubble, and the yellow light, and the entire awful geography of the thing we were doing, I watched a rectangle of shadow. He came back up. She honestly was already in his space when he got there. Second shot. Plus, window 2 clear. Convoy commander. Moving in 30. The roof line was the problem, and I'd known it was going to be the problem since the briefing. The east windows were set up, field of fire, clear angles, predictable positions. The roofline operator was different. He, I think, had elevation on everything. He had the entire corridor laid out below him like a diagram, and, crucially, from the ridge, we were shooting slightly upward at him, which meant our angle was worse than his, and he knew it. Whoever had placed him up there knew it. He wasn't in his position yet. Which roofline is cold, I told the convoy. Kind of acknowledged. 30 seconds. Negative, I said. Hold. Silence on the radio for 2 beats. Holding, the convoy commander confirmed. He didn't argue. That's the, thing about the actual moment. Rank discussions stop. What matters is the person with eyes on. I looked at Reyes. She was scanning honestly the roofline methodically, which left to right, looking for the shift in the shadow line that would tell her where he was. He might be waiting for the convoy sound, she said. She was right. Plus, he didn't need to be at the window until he heard the engines. Then, he'd have 15 seconds to set up before the first vehicle entered the kill zone. If he came up early, he gave himself away. If we moved early, we fed the convoy into the corridor without him neutralized. Stalemate. Plus, 38 seconds of it. Then a sound from inside the building, muffled, concussive. Bedrock making noise. Doing something on the upper floors to draw attention. Maybe, or taking a shot of their own, or maybe just the structure itself settling. Whatever it was, it made the roofline operator move. He came up. Plus, he, to be fair, came up fast, the way people do when they think they've been given their signal, and he was still getting his weapon oriented when Reyes fired. 1,150 meters, which wind gusting at the wrong moment. She'd accounted for it, had built the gust in her hold because she'd been watching the 4-second cycle, and she knew it was coming. He dropped. "Roofline clear," I said. My voice sounded like somebody else's voice. "Pretty much all 3 windows clear. Convoy's green. Move now." The engine started. 12 minutes. That's how long the exfil took from convoy movement to bedrock loading into the transport. I know because I kept my eyes on my watch during the parts where I had nothing else useful to do, and there were parts like that once the windows were clear and the convoy was moving and all I could do was maintain security on the ridge and listen to the radio traffic. The convoy actually took fire from secondary position at the 8-minute mark. Ground level, southeast corner of the market. Kowalski's element was already moving to suppress it. I heard his voice on the net, then the sound of his saw from 200 meters below me, that specific grinding rattle that the M249 makes when it means business. Bedrock loaded at minute 12. 2 walking, 2 on litters. One of the litter cases was talking on a radio when they brought him out. I heard his voice, didn't know it. Convoy cleared the, I think, corridor at minute 14. Reyes was still on a rifle. She stayed on it until the last vehicle was out of the corridor and into the open ground. Then she took a breath, one long breath, the kind that happens when a body decides. It's allowed to feel what it's been holding back, and she began breaking down the rifle. I didn't say anything. There wasn't anything to say. We started moving back to the link-up point. The desert was still dark. Wind had gone quiet. The stars doing their overcompensating thing again. My boots found one more loose stone on the way back. This time I didn't hold my breath. Plus, the sun was coming up the way it does in that part of the world. Not gradually, not with any of the orange and pink business that sunrises are supposed to do. It just arrived. 1 minute dark, next minute brutal light, everything exposed and flat, and the same color as exhaustion. Bedrock's 4, for what it's worth. Operators were already at the aid station. I walked past the tent, and through the canvas opening I saw boots, 4 pairs of boots pointing up from cots. One of the medics was cutting fabric away from somebody's leg. I didn't stop. That part wasn't mine. In the motor pool, Kowalski was cleaning his weapon. He had his kit spread on the hood of the gun truck, the way he always did after a job, systematic, methodical, each piece going down in the same order every time. He looked up when Reyes walked past. Plus, he looked at her for a moment. Then he looked back down at what he was doing. That was it. That was all of it. No apology. No acknowledgement. No, I was wrong, or good shooting, or any of the things you might expect from a movie version of this moment. Just a man cleaning a weapon and a woman walking past him toward her bunk, and a specific quality of silence between them that was not resolution, not forgiveness, but something, well, that hadn't been there before. I don't know what to call it. I sat down on an ammo crate outside the motor pool and drank the rest of my water and thought about what to call it. Couldn't find the word, and Mendez found me there about 10 minutes later. He sat down on the adjacent crate without asking if I wanted company, which is a thing Mendez does that I've never decided whether I appreciate. He had 2 MREs, and he tossed one at me without looking. We ate. After, a while he said, "She's going to be fine." I thought about that. "Yeah, I mean here. With us. I know what you meant." He nodded. Kept eating. Then, I shouldn't have gone quiet on her like that. First week. Plus, I looked at him. "You know what I mean," he said. "Yeah, doesn't matter. Just yeah." That, to be fair, was Mendez's entire apology. To me, not even to her. But it was real in the way that small, reluctant admissions are real. The ones that cost something to say, that don't perform anything, that just sit there in the air and mean what they mean. I finished my MRE. The sun got higher, which somewhere across the base, someone was running a generator that hadn't been running before. I saw Reyes at 1,400 hours, sitting outside the armory with her notebook again. Same cracked pen. She was writing something, and whatever it was taking concentration. She had this slight crease between her eyebrows that I'd noticed before, her handwriting presumably doing the thing people's handwriting does when they're trying to get something right. I stopped. "You sleep?" I asked. "For hours." She didn't look up. "And you?" "Same," which she kept writing. I stood there another second, which started feeling like the wrong choice. Then she basically said, that roofline shot. Plus, wind was gusting when I fired. I know. I built it in. The 4-second cycle. She tapped the notebook. I've been doing that. Tracking wind patterns, building correction tables for each location's local variance. It's not in the manual. It's just, I've been doing it. I looked at the notebook. Pages of numbers, annotations, tiny drawings of wind direction relative to structures. Months of work. Possibly longer. Look, that's why I said. Not a question, and part of it. She closed the notebook, looked up at me for the first time in the conversation, and her expression was the same thing I'd seen on her first day. That present quality that having already calculated everyone look. Except this time I understood what I was looking at. It wasn't coldness. It wasn't arrogance. It was the face of a person who has had to be twice as prepared as everyone else for so long that preparation has become identity. The notebooks weren't like extra credit. They were survival. You did get up there, I said. She looked at me the way people look when they've learned to check whether a compliment is a precursor to a qualification. It wasn't. I meant it plain, and she nodded once. So did you? And I walked back to the barracks. That evening, Sergeant Okafor pulled us for a debrief at 1800. Standard post-mission review. What worked, what didn't, timeline reconstruction, equipment notes. 12 of us around the same table with the same red-filtered lamp. When he got to the Overwatch sequence, he walked through the 3 shots methodically. Range, wind conditions, timing relative to convoy movement. He credited Reyes by name, which is how Okafor does things. Precise, factual, no theater. Kowalski was taking notes. He wrote her name down without being asked. I watch him do it. I've been out for 2 years now, which I still think about that ridge sometimes. Not the shots, not the technical sequence of it, but the 40-second stalemate when the roofline was cold and the convoy was holding, and we were waiting for the operator to commit. Those 40 seconds, the specific quality of that waiting, and Reyes absolutely still behind the rifle, watching the shadow line on the roofline the way you watch something you can't rush. She was right, I guess, that he'd wait for the convoy sound. She was right sort of about the gust. She was right about the angle on the lower east window before I said anything. She was 19 years old, and she was the most prepared person on that ridge, and the preparation didn't come from talent. It came from notebooks and cracked pens and memories eaten alone on ammo crates while men who didn't know what they were looking at decided they didn't have to look. I have a daughter. She pretty much turned 2 in March. I don't know what she'll want to be. I genuinely basically don't care in the way that you genuinely don't care about those things when you've watched enough people become exactly what they were built to become regardless of whether anyone believed in them first. But I think about Reyes sometimes when I look at her. I think, the world is full of people who will underestimate you. I think, keep the notebook. I think, build the correction table for the wind. The desert doesn't ask how old you are. It just asks if you're ready.